For generations, wild boars have destroyed crops, outsmarted farmers, and walked straight through every barrier ever built against them. But somewhere between desperation and hard science, farmers started uncovering tricks so effective and so unexpected that wildlife experts are still studying them. Some of these methods work in ways that don't make immediate sense. Others are so simple it's almost embarrassing. Stay with us until the very end because the final ones change everything. Subscribe now. You won't want to miss a single one. The moment farmers realized fear doesn't work. In October 2023, a rice and corn farmer in Chambers County, Texas, documented something that changed how he thought about wild boars. Over a single night, trail cameras captured a sounder of 58 feral hogs entering his field at exactly 11:42 p.m. By sunrise, over 60% of his crop was destroyed, translating to an estimated loss of $38,000, according to local extension reporting tied to Texas A&M Agrief Extension. But what he saw on camera mattered more than the damage. At 12:16 a.m., a loud propane cannon, an acoustic deterrent designed to simulate gunfire, went off just 40 meters from the group. The entire sounder paused. Several adults lifted their heads. One SA stepped forward, and within seconds, they went back to feeding. No panic, no retreat. This behavior aligns with controlled findings published by USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service in 2021, which showed that feral hogs habituate to repeated deterrents in less than 3 exposures. In other words, what scares them once becomes irrelevant almost immediately. And there is a biological reason. Wild boars operate under what wildlife biologists call high-reward risk tolerance. When caloric payoff is high, like corn, rice, or peanuts, their feeding drive overrides fear signals. Adult hogs can consume up to 7% of their body weight per day, meaning a 200-pound boar may require over 14 pounds of food daily. That pressure forces them to take risks most animals would avoid. For decades, farmers tried everything built on fear. High-voltage electric fencing delivering up to 7,000 volts. Chemical repellents using predator urine or ammonia compounds, motion-triggered lights, and sound cannons. Initial results always looked promising. Then the hogs came back because the system was flawed from the start. It assumed wild boars behave like deer or livestock, animals that avoid discomfort. But feral hogs are different. According to wildlife ecologist Dr. Billy Higginbotham, if there is food behind the barrier, a hog will keep testing it until it finds a way through. That was the turning point. Farmers began to understand a critical truth. You cannot train wild boars to stay out. You have to make entry impossible. The hidden weakness. No one noticed. Their eyes are failing them. For years, farmers assumed wild boars were nearly unstoppable because of their strength, intelligence, and adaptability. But in 2022, a lesser-known study from University of Georgia, Werrell School of Forestry and Natural Resources revealed something unexpected. Wild boars don't rely on vision the way most farmers think. Field observations and controlled tests showed that feral hogs have relatively poor long distance eyesight, especially in low light. Their visual acuity drops sharply beyond 20 to 30 m, meaning they struggle to clearly identify objects unless they are very close. Instead, they depend heavily on olfaction, smell, and auditory cues to navigate and detect danger. This discovery explained something farmers had been noticing but not fully understanding. Hogs weren't reacting to fences, traps, or even humans at a distance until it was too late. In one documented case in southern Oklahoma in March 2023, a farmer working with wildlife consultants set up a test perimeter using standard livestock panels. But instead of reinforcing the structure physically, they altered how it appeared to the hogs. They applied a simple modification: dark, non-reflective material lining the lower portion of the barrier, blocking visibility at ground level. When the sounder approached around 1:12 a.m., thermal footage showed hesitation, not retreat, just confusion. The lead SA moved side to side, attempting to visually assess the space. But without clear sight lines and with scent indicating food nearby, the group stalled. They didn't charge. They didn't test the barrier. They simply failed to commit. For over 40 minutes, the hogs circled without breaching before eventually leaving. What changed? The barrier didn't become stronger. It became visually unreadable. Wild boars need to see enough of an opening or weak point to attempt entry. When that visual confirmation is removed, their decision-making slows down dramatically, even when food is present. The scent barrier that turns their greatest strength against them. By 2024, farmers had already learned 2 critical things. You cannot scare wild boars, and you cannot rely on what they see. But what they hadn't fully exploited yet was the animal's most powerful tool: its nose. Wild boars possess one of the most sensitive olfactory systems among land mammals. According to research from National Wildlife Research Center, feral hogs can detect food sources buried up to 3 feet underground and track scent trails that are hours old. Their survival depends on it. So farmers flipped the strategy completely. Instead of hiding crops, they started overloading the hog's sense of smell. In a controlled field trial conducted in Louisiana Louisiana in June 2023, agricultural specialists experimented with fermented bait saturation zones placed deliberately outside protected crop areas. The bait, commonly referred to as sour mash, was made by soaking corn in water for several days, allowing natural fermentation to produce strong alcohol-based odors. But here's where the method became genius. Rather than placing bait randomly, farmers created concentrated scent corridors, areas so saturated with odor that hogs would lock onto them from long distances. Trail camera data showed that sounders adjusted their movement patterns by up to 1.8 m to follow these scent trails, completely bypassing nearby crop fields. In one documented case, a 32-acre peanut farm that had experienced repeated nightly damage saw zero intrusion for 12 consecutive nights after scent diversion was implemented. Not reduced damage, none. Why it works comes down to biology. Wild boars prioritize strongest scent equals sign highest reward. When a more intense, easier to access food signal exists, they will almost always choose it over a weaker protected source, even if that source is nutritionally identical. It's not deterrence. It's redirection at a neurological level. Even more effective, farmers began combining this with trapping strategies, placing bait zones that gradually lead into large corral traps. By the time hogs arrive, they're not cautious. They're committed because in their mind, they're not walking into danger. They're following the strongest food signal they've detected all night. The one-night rule. Why timing, not force, is what actually stops them. By the time farmers understood fear doesn't work, vision is limited and scent can be manipulated. One final breakthrough changed everything. Timing. In September 2022, a coordinated control study across multiple ranches in South Texas, supported by Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute, tracked over 100 GPS-colored wild boars to analyze movement patterns. What they found was precise. Wild boars do not roam randomly. They operate on predictable feeding windows. Peak activity occurred between 10:30 p.m. and 2:15 a.m., with over 70% of all crop intrusions happening inside that 4-hour window. Outside of it, movement dropped sharply. But here's what made it powerful. When hogs encountered resistance during that exact window, whether a failed entry, blocked access, or disrupted feeding, they didn't just try again immediately. They often abandoned that location entirely for several nights. In one documented case from November 2023, a farmer using live monitored traps waited until the entire sounder, 26 hogs, entered a baited zone at 11:58 p.m. Instead of triggering immediately, he held position. At 12:07 a.m., when all individuals were feeding and fully committed, the trap was triggered. Result: complete sounder removal in under 10 seconds. But the impact didn't stop there. Follow-up trail camera data showed no new hog activity in that field for 9 consecutive days, despite known populations nearby. Why? Because wild boars build temporal memory. They associate specific locations with outcomes tied to time, not just place. A negative or disrupted experience during peak feeding hours carries more weight than anything that happens outside that window. This is what farmers now call the one-night rule. You don't need constant pressure. You don't need daily intervention. You need one perfectly timed disruption when the entire group is most vulnerable. The silent network. Why one farm winning means nothing without the others. By 2024, some farmers had near-perfect systems. Trenches, scent diversion, time trapping, and for a while it worked. Fields stayed untouched. Trail cameras went quiet. Losses dropped to zero. But then, without warning, the hogs came back. In January 2024, a multi-county study coordinated through USDA National Feral Swine Damage Management Program tracked reinfestation patterns across controlled farmland in Texas and Oklahoma. The findings were blunt. Even after 90% local population removal, fields were reoccupied within 4 to 6 months, not by survivors, by newcomers. Wild boars have home ranges that can exceed 30 square miles, and dispersing juveniles, especially males, can travel over 15 miles in search of new territory. When one area is cleared, it doesn't stay empty. It becomes available. In one documented case, a farmer who had eliminated 3 separate sounders, over 70 hogs total, reported zero activity for nearly 12 weeks. Then in a single night, a new group of 19 hogs appeared on camera, entering from a neighboring property less than 3 miles away. The system didn't fail. It was isolated. This led to what experts now call landscape scale control, and it may be the most important trick of all. Farmers began coordinating, not casually, but systematically, shared trail camera data, synchronized trapping schedules, aligned removal efforts across multiple properties. Because here's the biological reality. To stop population growth, you must remove at least 70% of hogs annually. To reduce it, that number climbs above 80%. No single farm can sustain that, but multiple farms working together can. In regions where cooperative programs were implemented, reports showed long-term population suppression, not just temporary relief. Entire zones stayed hog-free for extended periods, not weeks, but over a year. This is where the strategy becomes bigger than tools or techniques. It becomes coordination. The drone advantage. How farmers started winning without being seen. By 2025, a new layer quietly entered the fight, and it solved a problem farmers didn't even realize was holding them back. Human presence. For years, even the best strategies had one flaw. The moment hogs detected repeated human activity, vehicles, footsteps, scent, they adjusted. Studies linked to Mississippi State University Extension Service showed feral hogs could shift movement patterns within 24 to 48 hours after detecting consistent human pressure. So farmers removed themselves from the equation. They went airborne. In a documented operation in February 2025 across a 6,000-acre ranch in central Texas, wildlife control teams deployed thermal-equipped drones flying at altitudes between 100 and 150 m. From that height, the drones were effectively silent and invisible to hogs below. But what they revealed changed everything. Thermal imaging identified entire sounders hidden in dense brush areas completely inaccessible to ground hunters. In one single night operation, drones tracked a group of 43 hogs moving along a dry creek bed at 1:37 a.m. Ground teams didn't search. They didn't guess. They moved with precision, guided in real time. Within 22 minutes, the entire group was intercepted. What makes this method powerful isn't just detection, it's elimination without warning. Unlike traditional hunting, where engine noise or light gives hogs time to scatter, drones allow teams to locate and surround targets before the animals even know they've been found. And there's a deeper advantage. Wild boars learn from ground threats, vehicles, gunshots, human scent. But aerial threats, they have no evolutionary reference for it. They don't adapt because they don't recognize it as danger. In trial programs combining drone surveillance with coordinated ground response, some operations reported removal rates exceeding 80% in targeted zones within weeks, not months. The water trap, the one resource wild boars cannot ignore. By now, farmers had figured out how to block, confuse, guide, and even hunt wild boars with precision. But one discovery pushed the strategy even further by targeting something hogs cannot negotiate with: water. In August 2023, a drought impact study monitored by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department tracked feral hog movement across multiple ranches during extreme heat conditions. What they found was absolute. When temperatures exceeded 95 degrees Fahrenheit, over 80% of hog activity concentrated within 1 mile of reliable water sources, ponds, irrigation runoff zones, and artificial troughs. Unlike food, which can vary, water is non-negotiable. Wild boars lack efficient sweat glands and regulate body temperature primarily through wallowing, coating themselves in mud and water to cool down. Without access, heat stress can become fatal within hours. Farmers realized something powerful. You don't have to chase hogs across hundreds of acres. If you control water, you control where they must go. In a documented case from July 2024, a rancher in South Texas restricted access to 3 out of 4 natural water points on his property using simple trenching and reinforced barriers. He left only one accessible location and positioned a large corral trap around it. For 6 consecutive nights, trail cameras showed increasing activity. By night 7, a full sounder of 31 hogs entered the site between 12:23 a.m. and 10:05 a.m. They weren't cautious, they were desperate. When the trap was triggered remotely, every single animal was captured at once. No scattering, no survivors, because unlike bait, which hogs can ignore, water forces commitment. Further field data showed that during dry periods, hog visitation to controlled water points increased by up to 300%, making capture rates significantly higher than bait-only setups. This method revealed a final layer of the genius trick. It's not just about blocking or redirecting behavior. It's about identifying the one need the animal cannot delay, cannot outthink, and cannot survive without. The fertility lock, the long-term trick that stops the next generation. By this point, farmers had learned how to block hogs, redirect them, trap entire sounders, and even control where they move. But one problem still remains. Even if you remove them, they come back. And the reason is simple: reproduction. According to data compiled by USDA National Wildlife Research Center, a single breeding SA can produce 2 litters per year, averaging 5 to 6 piglets per litter. Under ideal conditions, populations can increase by over 150% annually. So farmers and wildlife specialists began testing something radically different. Not removal, interruption. In controlled pilot programs between 2022 and 2024, researchers deployed a contraceptive method known as Ghana, an immunocontraceptive vaccine originally developed for wildlife population control. Here's how it works. The vaccine triggers the animal's immune system to produce antibodies that suppress reproductive hormones. In treated saves, fertility drops dramatically, sometimes for multiple years after a single dose. In one monitored field trial in Alabama, a localized population of feral hogs that received targeted contraceptive treatment showed a reproductive decline of over 60% within 18 months. But here's the genius part. Farmers didn't rely on capturing every hog. They focused on key individuals, dominant breeding saves within sounders. Because of the hog's social structure, these individuals account for a disproportionate share of reproduction, reduce their fertility, and the entire group's growth collapses. Even more interesting, behavioral studies showed that treated SAS continued normal movement and social activity. That means they stay integrated within the group, effectively stabilizing it while preventing population expansion. No sudden migration, no immediate replacement, just fewer hogs over time. This method doesn't deliver instant results like trapping or hunting, but when combined with everything else, trenches, scent diversion, timing, drones, it creates something farmers never had before. Control over the future population, not just the current one. The crop switch, the low-tech trick that makes fields invisible to hogs. By now, farmers had learned how to block, trap, redirect, and even reduce reproduction. But one overlooked strategy turned out to be just as powerful, changing what's in the field itself. Not stronger fences, not more traps, just planting differently. In 2023, a comparative field study conducted through University of Florida IFAS Extension analyzed crop damage patterns across multiple farms dealing with heavy feral hog pressure. The results were precise. Wild boars showed strong preference for high-sugar, high-energy crops, especially corn, peanuts, rice, and sorghum. In test plots, damage rates to corn fields were recorded at over 80%, while adjacent fields planted with less palatable crops like cotton or certain forage grasses saw damage drop below 10%. Same location, same hog population, completely different outcome. Why? Because wild boars optimize for caloric return versus effort. A corn field offers dense, predictable, high-energy food. A cotton field, by contrast, offers almost nothing nutritionally valuable to a hog. Even if accessible, it's simply not worth the effort. Farmers started using this to their advantage. Instead of leaving vulnerable crops exposed along the outer edges of farmland, they began planting buffer zones, strips of low-attraction crops surrounding high V-value fields. In one documented case in southern Georgia in May 2024, a peanut farmer created a 20 m wide perimeter of Begia grass around his primary crop. Trail camera data over 6 weeks showed something striking. Hogs approached the outer boundary, paused, and in over 70% of observed cases turned away without entering. No fence, no deterrent system, just a field that didn't make sense to them. This works because wild boars rely heavily on reward expectation. If the first layer they encounter offers no payoff, many will not invest the energy to explore further, especially when alternative food sources exist nearby. Subscribe now because what's coming next is even more disturbing.